Welcome back to Almost Above Average, where we delve into inspiring stories and valuable insights from remarkable individuals. Today, we are honored to have Professor Elizabeth Tolman with us. Elizabeth is not just a professor at UNC Chapel Hill. She's a mother, a widow, and a beacon of positivity and strength in her community. Despite facing personal challenges, Elizabeth's dedication to creating a supportive and nurturing environment in the classroom has helped countless students thrive under her guidance. Her passion for fostering a sense of belonging and empowerment is truly remarkable. Elizabeth also offers invaluable advice on navigating conversations with those who have experienced loss. Drawing from her own experiences and wisdom, her insights on what to say, and importantly, what not to say, can guide us all in showing compassion and understanding to those in need. In a moment that shook her community, Elizabeth found herself at the intersection of tragedy when a student committed a grave act of violence on campus. Her resilience and grace under such harrowing circumstances are a testament to her strength of character and her unwavering commitment to healing and growth. Please join me in welcoming the extraordinary Professor Elizabeth Tolman to the show. And let's go now to that conversation. What their goals and dreams were. I don't know why that fascinates me, but it just does. And working with you, I found you fascinating, and that's why I wanted you to do this. So I do appreciate you doing it for me. And I read your piece, and I don't think it needs any more editing. You could probably put that straight out.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Have you ever, are you on Substack?
No. I follow a couple of people on Substack, but I don't have a Substack.
That might be a good avenue for you to release some of that stuff.
Oh,
that was a very thoughtful piece. I just read it again to remind me. But so what was the title? It was The Soil. You want to tell the story of why you wrote that?
Sure. So I would say maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I was listening to the radio, and there was a piece on about soil erosion in the Mississippi River Valley. That's something that does not interest me in the slightest bit. But the reporter was interviewing different farmers, and he said, "What is your crop that you grow?" And each one of them, without pausing for a second, said, "Oh, I'm a soil farmer." And the reporter sounded puzzled, and then each of them said, "Oh, and well, yeah, out of that soil, I grow corn or I grow soybeans or what have you." And it just struck me in a way of that's a profound statement that obviously for a farmer, it's what they do. They deal with the soil, and if their soil is bad, then they can't grow their crops. But I started just kind of mulling it over in the background. And as you said, I teach Spanish at UNC Chapel Hill. And so I started thinking, like, what is the soil of my classroom? And it was just something that was going on in the background. And at the time, I had recently gone back to teaching full time after the death of my husband, and my youngest child had finished kindergarten. And I had been thinking all along, well, it's kind of time to go back. And then my husband got sick and died. So I was like, oh, I kind of need health insurance and an income. So this would be a good time to go back full time. I had been teaching part time for 16 years since my daughter was born. And so I taught 2 classes. They were the exact same class, beginning level Spanish back to back. And the first class was just very boring and lackluster, and nothing seemed to work in that class. And I'm sure from the student perspective, it was fine, and my evaluations were fine. But the second class was really dynamic. And after I heard this piece about the soil, I started wondering, what's the difference here? I'm a very experienced teacher, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And all of a sudden, one day, it hit me that the physical structure of the classroom was very different between the two. In the first classroom, it was stadium style seating, and the kids were just wedged in there, and they couldn't move. And so I never switched up the groups, which is something we're taught as teachers that we're supposed to do. We're supposed to switch up the groups regularly.
Yeah.
Because speaking Spanish, or really in any subject, but particularly a foreign language, it's very intimidating speaking out in the classroom because you absolutely know you're going to make a mistake. And nobody likes to make mistakes.
Yeah.
But if you feel like you're among a group of friends, the barrier, what we call in pedagogical terms, the effective filter, is a lot lower. And you feel like, oh, I can make a mistake in front of Chris because he's my friend and he's not going to laugh at me and he's not going to think worse of me.
Right.
And so I realized in the second classroom, it was a normal size, it was flat, there weren't these stadiums, and I mixed up the groups. And then a year or so later, the pandemic hit, and I had to suddenly pivot to being a homeschooling mom of three children, well, the oldest of whom was in college at that point, but still at home, and also teaching on Zoom, which really was unfortunate in many ways. But I realized pretty quickly that my students were getting to know each other because I used breakout rooms, and I used the breakout rooms every day, and they were randomly sorted. And so the students were
What's a breakout room?
Okay, so a breakout room when you're on Zoom is when I put them into individual groups. There's this little feature from the owner side where you
Hmm.
can put the students into rooms, and then they're just in a room with three people or four people instead of in the whole classroom.
Like you were doing before the pandemic, you started
Right,
mixing up the groups, right? Okay.
exactly. And so the students were all getting to know each other because they were all interacting.
Yeah.
And when you're teaching in an actual classroom, mixing up the groups during the class is super disruptive because there's no easy way to do it. And somebody always knocks over somebody's water bottle, and it's a whole thing. It's just, it
Or
takes
I'm a class clown, so I'm making a big deal out of moving seats. Like, hey, everybody, look at me, right?
totally, there's always a Chris.
Yeah, I get it.
So, when I came out of the pandemic, I thought I need to reproduce that. And it occurred to me, you know what? I'm just going to make the groups be in the same space and randomly sort the students. And so when they walk into the classroom, they see their name on the PowerPoint as they're in either group 1 through 5. And they know where those spots are in the room. And then they just go sit in that corner.
Sort them.
They sort themselves. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's randomly done every day. I use Excel, but it could be anything. But it really has transformed my teaching because all of a sudden my students, by the end of the third week, they've worked with everybody and they know
Mhm.
each other's names. And it just struck me like that's pretty
So
profound.
you're building a community inside the classroom thing.
So for me,
Everybody knows each other, so now they feel a little more confident to share or to practice in
right,
Spanish, right?
right, exactly. So for me, my soil for my profession is the community that I build within the classroom and
Mm-hmm.
the relationships that the students are building among themselves. So
Yeah.
my job is to prepare that soil, which means that I facilitate the development of these relationships.
Right.
What they do with the relationships is that's not for me to worry about.
Right.
Uh, Now, for a high school teacher, maybe that's not as necessary because the kids already know each other. And maybe there's certain kids that you know better than to put together in a group ever.
Right.
But as a college teacher, where my students typically don't know each other when they come in the door, and they're not together every single day, they're only together a few times a week for 50 minutes each time.
Yeah.
It's like I don't have that much time. But if I invest a lot of time at the beginning of the semester, by the end of the semester, I walk in the room and they're just chattering away and
Yeah.
before class starts. And that's what I want because then when class starts, it's just I have to shut them up.
Right.
Like, okay, that's great.
It sounds like an idea like that you put together, you tried, and it worked. That would be something that reinvigorate you about your job, or at least me, if I came up
Oh,
with something that worked.
absolutely.
Right. Makes it a lot more exciting to go into work, I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. And then the mental health of college students has been really, really lousy. It had started to decline. I've been teaching at the college level since 1990, since I was a brand new college graduate and I started graduate school myself. So I was like 22 and my students were 22.
How was that?
That was a little intimidating and nerve wracking.
But I bet it built your confidence way up. You had to
It
take
did.
abuse for years, I'm sure.
Yeah. They were mostly respectful, but there were a few moments when I felt out of my league. But now, especially being a mom, I'm just like, just behave. And they do.
Just behave.
It comes with that innate sense of authority that I developed over the years. But it was really exciting to get to know that. But my point was that mental health, I think, has been declining among college students, and it really picked up in the mid 2000s. Um, and it has accelerated, especially with the pandemic.
Oh
And
yeah.
so for them to be able to develop relationships with one another, I feel like, just as a fellow member of the species, that's really important, to
Yeah.
have them to be able to develop friendships that are not mediated through the interwebs, that can develop into something genuine. And
Right.
I for sure.
Especially now that since the 2000s, like there's so much access to the internet, you can totally go without human contact outside of your family if you wanted to.
Mhm.
But learning those social skills with actual people in the real world is important.
Right,
Someone has to do it.
right. And because this particular set of college students spent their high school years in front of black screens on a computer because they never turned on their cameras, they
Yeah.
have forgotten how to develop those skills. And those were the years when they were supposed to be doing that.
They're very formidable years. They didn't
Yeah,
form.
formidable and formative, but they weren't.
Right. I could see that. Do you think that was the cause of all the depression that you're seeing at the
Yeah, I
colleges?
mean, maybe not all of it. I think part of it was social media that makes us all compare ourselves negatively to this curated image that we think we're supposed to be.
Yeah.
And then just, gosh, the isolation and the feeling of, oh my goodness, I have to be afraid of strangers or I might kill my grandma. It's a heavy load,
Yeah.
you know.
I think
And
we're all trying to navigate new challenges with how much access we have to each other now.
Mhm.
I can I can find information on anyone if I want to.
Right. And when I was in high school, I might find out on a Tuesday that I missed a party on Friday night, and I might
Right.
feel somewhat sad. But now it's like 2 minutes into the party, I realize, oh, all my friends are there and I'm not. And that really
Yeah.
sucks.
It does. It accelerates all the emotions.
Exactly.
That's tough. I remember when we were during the process of building your roof, I remember getting a call on our group chat that said that stay away from UNC campus. There's an active shooter right now. And that was just scary for me. But you
Mhm.
were there that day,
Yeah.
right?
And it happened, I'm going to say 100 feet from where I was, but it was inside of another building and I didn't know. But
Yeah.
that I can see from my office window, I can see that office where it happened.
What was
And
that like? What was the experience like?
also, it was a graduate student who seems to have schizophrenia. And he was upset about something and killed his faculty mentor, I assume his advisor. But we didn't know at the time what had happened. We just got the alerts on our phone, and I was in the office of a colleague, and we heard the sirens, and so then we checked our phones, and I saw the thing, but I thought, oh, this is probably just a false alarm because we've had other false alarms, and maybe because nobody wants that to be real. I just didn't really believe it. So I had been planning to go down to my classroom a little early, and on the way, stop and talk to a representative who sells textbooks from one of the textbook companies that I've gotten to know over the last couple of years. So I stopped by and I saw Kayla, and she said, yeah, I've seen people screaming and running by the window. And she was actually overlooking it, but she had no idea.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, give me your phone number. And, because she didn't get the alerts from the university since she wasn't a faculty member or a student.
Oh yeah.
And so then I walked down a few doors to my classroom. The classroom was locked, and I knocked on the door and I said, hi, this is Professor Tolman, let me in. And there were 4 girls in there, so they let me in. And I started setting up for class, and they're furiously texting on their phones in the back of the room. And it's starting to dawn on me like, oh, this is kind of
A little
serious.
bigger than I thought.
I'm not sure this is a false alarm, but I was still, and those poor kids, they grew up on active shooter drills. That's
Right.
not, very fortunately, that has not been part of my history. And so I said, well, I'm going to text Kayla and have her come down to our room. So
Yeah.
I texted Kayla, and I cracked open my door, and I saw her take off her high heels and come bolting down the down the hall,
Like
and
Superwoman.
like Superwoman. And then we
Yeah.
locked the door behind us, and the students had made sure that the light was out. So we're in a basement room with no windows. The room Kayla was in had a window and the door didn't lock, so I was very glad to get her down to where we were.
Yeah.
And there we sat, 6 people, and we were together, but not really, because we were alone. We were alone with our own preoccupations. As me, it started to dawn on me, like, holy cow, this is real. And then the rumors were flying around, and the students were saying, oh, there have been bodies seen in Cotto Labs. And I realized that's the building next door. And they were just spewing all the rumors that come about from Yik Yak and all the social
Twitter
media.
and Instagram and
Yeah, the ones that I'm not on, happily.
yeah.
But they were keeping us updated in hushed tones, and I cautioned them, we don't know what's real yet. And I was correct in that the rumors were overblown, but they were correct to be very alarmed. And I started texting my kids and realizing, like, I'm a solo parent here. This is pretty serious. So, and I knew my 2 children who are students at NC State would find out about it quickly. So I texted them first,
Yeah.
and then and the texts were coming in batches because the systems were so overloaded. So they wouldn't go through, and then there would be about 3 minutes of nothing, and then you'd get 45 texts all at the
Oh
same time.
man.
So it was very intense. And we were in there for 3 hours with no access to the bathroom or anything. And the students had said, well, this is how it's going to go down. The police are going to come and they're going to start banging on doors. And that's how we'll know that it's over, because that's what they had learned in their active shooter drills in high school, which is truly horrifying. And
I
I
hate that.
realized,
Yeah.
as a parent, like, my kids have been going through this, and who knows what that did to their psyches. And I was oblivious.
Yep.
But anyway, I was glad that they knew the drill, because sure enough, we could hear the police banging on the doors one by one. And one of my students in particular was absolutely terrified for me to open the door. But I was thinking logically, like, we know this is the police because we've been hearing them throughout the halls. Like, this is not a
No
shooter.
more gunshots.
Right,
Right.
exactly. But when they were saying, they were banging on the doors and saying, come out with your hands up. And so we felt like we were being treated like criminals. And there 3 guys with military grade weaponry banged on our door. And they looked like they came out of central casting. I mean, they all looked like Dwayne the Rock. Very
We got all
impressive.
the superheroes at the school today. Sweet.
Yes, but not cracking a smile. They were tense,
Yeah.
which is understandable. And at the time, we didn't know this, but the shooter just did his thing, and then left. And he just wandered for several miles before somebody in a neighborhood saw him. But in the meantime, he had ditched the weapon. And it was very reasonable to think that he had entered our building and ditched the weapon there, because we were the closest building. But
Yeah.
I had no knowledge of that at the time. All I knew is that these guys, who are like a foot taller than me and buff,
They're pretty serious. They're buff.
very scary looking guys, that
Yeah.
they just said, come out. So we come out, 6 young women, well, 5 young women and me, out with our hands up, and they told us, go this way, someone will direct you. And then we were all being funneled down to a side street, and then marched up the hill, and then the buses weren't running. So I told Kayla, well, I'll take you to my car, which is parked at my friend's house. So we
Mm.
walked for 40 minutes, and then we went in and used my friend's bathroom very happily.
Yeah.
And but so then we made it through that. It was very intense. It was my son Alex's first day of middle school, and I wasn't home to get him off the bus, which was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
I had texted a neighbor, and so she kept him at her house. So I picked him up, and I just said, so how was your day? Your first day? And he said, oh, it was boring. And I said, oh, that's wonderful.
Yes. What a good day at school for you.
I've had a boring day, and I was praying, thinking like, I've got to present this in such a way that I don't communicate my terror to him. I just
Right.
communicate, like I told him all the facts, but I was trying to be very chill.
Yeah.
And then we had 3 days. I think that was a Monday. It was like the maybe the fourth class that I had. So Monday class started, and then the following week this happened. We didn't go back to school until Thursday, so I didn't have that class again until Friday. And I thought, okay, my soil is my sense of community, which I have barely started working on, but what in the world am I going to do? Because I had these students that had been holed up with me that happened to have come to the building early, which is why they were there. The rest
Hmm.
of my class was probably outside walking to my class, so they were terrorized too because they
Right.
were outside when this happened.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, what can I do to help? And I decided I'm going to play head, shoulders, knees, and toes in Spanish. So I had this video that was intended for 3-year-olds, and I put it on and I just said, stand up, we're going to do this. And we jumped around. And by the end of it, we were all laughing. And then we just commenced with the lesson because I thought, I am not a psychologist. I don't know what to do to help, but I do know that,
Everyone's smiling. Let's move on with the class.
I
Right.
do know that if we can just shake.
That's scary as hell.
So,
How
mhm.
long were you guys in the room for? You and the other
3 hours.
3 hours?
Yeah.
Jeez. And
So
it,
then 10 days later, at almost the same time of day, about 5 hours, 5 minutes earlier, I was doing one of those mandated trainings that the university makes you do online periodically. It
yeah.
was sexual harassment. And I thought, oh, I've got 5 minutes left in this training, and then I'll go down to my classroom. And like then I heard the sirens go off, and I thought, oh, hell no, not again. And I bolted for the bathroom. That was the
Yeah.
first thing I did. And then I came running back into my office, and I got my phone out to text my two older kids, and I couldn't do it. My hands were shaking so badly. So it was like that book, The Body Knows the Score or whatever. I
Hmm.
felt like I didn't feel stressed. I felt totally calm, but my body knew that I was stressed because I
Like you
couldn't.
were in fight or flight. Your body was in fight or flight, and your mind is calm, kind of
Yeah,
thing.
exactly. So it took my
Huh.
body a good 30 or 45 seconds before my hands stopped shaking enough to text my kids that
Yeah.
I was fine. And that time it turns out that some guy had gone into the student union where there's a bagel shop and had brandished a weapon, and he was upset about something in his personal life. And lots of students were there and saw it, and he didn't fire his gun. So we were only locked down for maybe an hour and a half that time, but it was pretty terrifying to think, what in the
10 days
world?
after, yeah, you're already
Yeah,
in
I mean,
active shooter mode, right?
yeah, what is happening in this country that this is now part of our normal existence?
Yeah.
And like, how do we come back from this as a campus? It was pretty terrifying. But again, I just thought my community, the community I'm building with my students, and then the community that I have built over the years that has helped me through very difficult times, which was Tom's illness and death. So,
Who's Tom's illness?
my husband, when
Your
he got
husband.
cancer. Yeah.
I didn't know you were married, and I never asked. But when I read your thing, you put it in there. So I'm very
Yeah.
sorry that you lost your husband.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's tough.
It was pretty crappy.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, my dad, he passed away in December
Mm.
he had brain cancer. It came out of nowhere.
Oh,
Like at the beginning or the end of October, my mom called me. She's like, "Your dad's in the hospital again for the second time in 2 weeks. They found cancer on his lungs, cancer on his brain, and cancer on his kidneys."
oh,
And so I flew back real quick. Like he was walking 5 miles a day. He was healthy. He just worked really hard, and then all of a sudden that happened, and he passed away at the end of December. And that was tough. I went back for a little bit just to hang out with my mom through all that stuff.
Hmm.
But that was tough, man. I understand.
Yeah, it's really terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, my condolences to you and your
yeah,
family.
thank you.
Hmm.
So
You
I
said,
know,
how is UNC, University of North Carolina, the community coming back from all those two active shooters that happened recently?
it was really, really hard. And I was thinking, I felt like after the first event, I felt like I had it together, but I didn't. And I was making all sorts of mistakes because I coordinate a bunch of different classes and I had to redo the syllabus for each one of them
Hmm.
because we had missed all these days.
Right.
And I posted the syllabus for one class on the website of another. And I was like, oh, I've got my act together. I'm coping just fine. And in the meantime, we had to go to the daughter of a friend died. And so we had to go to the funeral. And it was just like too much
Yeah.
being piled on me last semester. And then one of my uncles got cancer and died. And it was just like,
Stop
and
this.
I know, yeah, I just felt like an existential dread or terror or something. But I, it made me realize, like, for me, okay, I have all the things I have to do in my life, but I'm not trying to learn something.
Right.
And for the students, trying to learn when your brain is on high alert like that is almost impossible.
No.
And
It's
so,
focused on like action or doing something
yeah,
instead of
right,
taking in stuff, right?
right. So a lot of students really struggled. I was very impressed with how they managed to pull it together. But yeah, there were students who were emailing saying, I'm so sorry, I just have to skip class today because my mental health is in the toilet. And I'd
Right.
say, yeah, I get that. Believe me, more than you know.
We're all there too.
Yeah,
We're just not talking about it out loud.
right. So this
Yeah.
semester, I think everybody took an easier load. I feel like most students are this semester are taking the minimum number of credits that they can
Good.
because last semester was so tough, which I
Yeah.
support, but next semester means
Hard work.
everybody's going to be overloaded. Yeah.
Yeah. Double time. Well, that makes sense. After a big traumatic event like that, like,
Hmm.
all right, let's just hold the horses for a little bit and
Hmm.
focus for a minute.
And I know that doing my thing to build community in the classroom can't begin to heal the wounds. I am not a psychiatrist or psychologist, but I think having developing real relationships with people helps us in our life.
I think you're wrong about that. I think you developing that community inside your class is helping everything outside that class. I think
Uh,
it all starts with two people, one or two
yeah,
people, are a good idea.
right. That's why I do it.
I
Right
think you're doing it
before,
great.
thanks. When I first came back um, full time, I went to the meeting at the beginning of the semester for all the new teachers, even though I didn't really qualify as a new teacher. And the director of the language studies said something that struck me as being very profound. She said, and she was mostly talking to the graduate students, but she said, very few people have the opportunity to impact the lives of so many people in their professional lives.
Yep.
And it just hit me like, wow, that's really true. I'm not just dealing with numbers on a page here. Each one of these is a person. And I
It's
have the
probably more than that. They compound because that person's going to grow into a person that has children typically, right? So you
right.
have a very important role in a lot of people's lives,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
I mean, there are jobs that deal with more people than I do, but
Well, yeah,
not in a meaningful way. And I've
right.
like being a teacher. Wow, you really have a chance to impact people, and I try to be mindful of that.
Yeah, you absolutely do. There was a lot of talk in the article you wrote on community, um, and bereavement. How did you get through like grieving your husband?
So I don't know that you ever. I think you just live your life one day after the other. and
Right.
your concept of time changes a whole bunch in ways that I can't quite articulate. Um, but I do feel like I've developed a list in my head of things to say and to not say to the bereaved.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that, the first thing I would say before I'll talk about how my community helped me was, don't say to the bereaved, how can I help? How can I help? Because the person who is going through something that profound has no idea what he or she needs. And when someone would come to me and say, how can I help? Then I would feel like I had to come up with something for them to do so that they would feel like they were helping me, which was a huge imposition on me because I
Yeah.
had nothing they could have done would have helped me. I mean,
Really, they're asking you to give them something to do.
exactly.
Right. And yeah, that's
Right.
not helpful to you.
No, it's not that people intend
Right.
to put the burden on the bereaved. It's just that we are terrible in our culture about dealing with these things,
Mm-hmm.
and we just don't know what the heck we're, we're doing. The
I
other
think that's important. I think what you said is very important because I felt the same way. It's like you can't help. Like I'm kind of
right,
offended that you're asking me, but I'm gonna be nice. So I'm gonna be like, no, no, thank you, blah blah blah. But
exactly,
really, I'm just like, man, just say you're sorry that this happened and your thoughts are with me. I love that.
right, right,
Like I can handle
yeah.
that.
And the other thing that was hard is I think sometimes people don't want to tell other people that something bad has happened to a friend because they feel like it's not their information to share.
Hmm.
But I would say in the case of a death, you don't have to share the details of the death. Maybe that's not somebody's business, especially if it's a case of suicide or something like that. But share the fact that someone has died, because if you don't, then that person will run into people who will say casually, so how was your Christmas, Chris? And you'll be like, ugh, it was the worst ever. My dad died. And
Yeah.
then you have to tell them and you have to watch them process that information. And then there's that awkwardness when they don't know what to say and you don't know what to say. But if they had known, then
Right.
they could have just led with it. Chris, I am so sorry. That really, really sucks. And
Right.
you'd be like, yes, it does. And then it goes from
Well,
there.
you get right to the healing part.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. And
I
it
like that.
depends on how well you know somebody.
Right.
Then you can say, oh, I really liked your dad. He really helped me when. Those things are gifts to the bereaved,
Yeah.
even though it might make them cry, which is not what people want. But I love sharing about my husband because I don't get to do that very often. And people either don't want to go there because it makes them feel awkward, or because they didn't know him and it feels weird to them or whatever. But I think that's a gift to say, so tell me about your
Tell me about your husband, Elizabeth. I don't know him. I
right.
would love to know about your
Yeah,
husband.
exactly. That, oh, he was awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. What year did he pass away?
2018. And he
Oh, that's
died 3 days after our daughter turned 16. He died on Father's Day, and he
oh,
died 6 days before Alex turned 7. So it was a very intense and horrible.
yeah.
Yeah.
What did he do for work?
He was a computer programmer.
A computer programmer
Yeah.
and a professor. I like that.
Yeah. Hmm.
What did he like doing for what was his like hobbies and stuff?
Board games. He loved
Board
board
games?
games. Hmm.
Big
Yeah.
Monopoly family, you guys?
Not Monopoly, but lots of board games. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Mhm.
that's cool.
Yeah. And he was in a board gaming group that met every week, and we just hosted them this week. So
Yeah,
my son was home for spring break. So
that's good.
it's
How
great.
are the kids doing with that?
They're doing well now. I mean, it's been up and down, but I think we managed to weather it well. And part of the reason for that is because we had so much support. And I will say, I said earlier, I think people shouldn't ever say, what can I do? People should just say, would it be helpful if I did your laundry? Or can I stop by on Wednesday? That sort of thing is super helpful.
Yeah.
Um, and we had a lot of people who just would stop by with groceries or who brought us meals or who just came by and said, let's go on a hike. And
Yeah.
that was amazing. And
We could do a whole episode on just bereavement in the
mhm,
future if you'd like, because I think
yeah,
that's some good stuff that we just talked about that I've never heard anyone talk about, but I felt it, and you've obviously felt it.
hmm,
Um, that could be a possible podcast idea.
yeah. No, I think though that okay, so I'm a teacher,
Hmm.
and for me, the soil, the thing that underlies everything else I do is the sense of community that I can help to facilitate and to develop in my classroom so that my beautiful flowers can grow with my students speaking Spanish very excitedly and without being freaked out that they're making mistakes.
Right.
But I think everybody has a soil that underlies what they do in their life, whether professionally or just personally. And I think that's something that we can all think about and try to cultivate
I
to
really love that idea.
extend the metaphor of farming.
It is a perfect metaphor. I thought you started it was really cool how you started like I was talking to a farmer about what he farmed and he told me soil and I didn't care about it at all. But there was a metaphor in there that I did care about.
Right.
I thought
Well,
that was really interesting.
I wasn't a student of literature for nothing.
No, you graduated from UNC,
I
right?
did.
Yeah.
I have a
And
master's
there's two
degree.
you're published twice
Yes,
in
I have two
textbooks.
textbooks. Well, I'm not the sole author on either one, but yes, I worked with a team of people to get two textbooks produced and published. One is in introductory Spanish, the other one's intermediate, and both of them have a healthcare focus. So this came about because it's so funny how in life, you have some conversations that just change your life,
Hmm.
and then most of the time, nothing really impacts your life that profoundly.
Right.
But one day I was in my office in graduate school, and a fellow student said to me, could you take over my class for me at the hospital? I teach volunteers and staff how to speak Spanish because I've got to have surgery. And I said, oh, sure. And
Hmm.
then she never really came back to doing that after she recovered from her surgery. So I just kept doing it. And then people kept finding out that I taught these classes and kept offering me new classes. And then one day I got a phone call from someone who worked at the medical school, and she said, I've heard that you teach classes for healthcare professionals. Could you teach a class at the medical school? And I said, sure. And so then the chancellor at the time of the chancellor of the university had taken a bus tour of all 100 counties in North Carolina. And
Hmm.
he had done that to make sure that the university was meeting the needs of the state, because obviously, as a public university, we need to ensure that we are meeting the needs of the state.
Yep.
And he traveled to all of these different healthcare facilities, and they kept telling him, please train your graduates how to speak Spanish because we are inundated with patients and we don't have the money to hire interpreters, and we also don't have the money to train our staff to speak Spanish. We don't have Spanish teachers. And like in Texas and Florida, they have a lot of homegrown healthcare professionals who speak Spanish. But in North Carolina, we don't really have that.
Yeah.
And so he came back and tasked someone from his office to put together a team to develop some materials to teach UNC students how to speak Spanish, UNC healthcare profession students.
Hmm.
And so I was part of that team. And she came to us and said, okay, the chancellor has given us some money, and I want you to build a Cadillac on the budget of a Hyundai. And so she said, I charge you to dream big. And we
Yeah.
said, okay, if we're going to dream big, we're going to film some movies to
Yeah.
do this. And so we got together grant money, totaling over $1 million for each of these textbooks. And
Nice.
then we hired filmmakers and we got a script written, and it was really, really
Where can I find this movie?
fun. Yeah.
Is
If
it,
you get the textbooks, they're part of the
oh,
book.
is that the only way?
Yeah. I don't think they're released anywhere, but
Well,
both,
let me
both
ask you
books
this. How
are.
many colleges is your textbooks being taught in?
I don't know, but um, a lot over the years.
Okay. I
So,
was going to say, if it's only UNC, man, I'll go sell books for you at other colleges.
yeah, the our publisher Pearson of one of our books has just sold off its language division. So it's been bought by another publisher, and I hope that that will get it out to new audiences because they are
Yeah.
going to promote it. Pearson has lost interest in world languages.
Well,
So
let's promote it right here. What are the books called?
they're called Salud and Asu Salud.
A su salud,
Yeah, which means to your health. It's a toast.
a
Um,
toast to your health.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I assumed that you were a Caucasian woman, right?
Yeah.
So I found that fascinating too, that you were a Spanish professor. Why do you know Spanish, first of all, and how do you come about teaching it at UNC?
So my mom's sister, my mom is also white, and her younger sister married a man from Cuba, my uncle Felipe, and he played the little boy in the movie Old Man in the Sea.
Hmm.
He's from Cuba, and when
Okay.
he was 12, he was in that movie with Spencer Tracy, and he met Ernest Hemingway when they filmed Old Man in the Sea, and but
Wow.
his family fled Cuba because of the revolution and
Hmm.
ended up in the Washington, D.C. area and met my aunt. And he was an engineer, um, didn't continue with his acting career.
No.
And they moved to Venezuela and they have 5 kids. And so when they came for visits, they would stay for a long time because it was so far away. And so I heard Spanish a lot growing up from my cousins, and
Hmm.
I started studying it in school because I was fascinated by it.
Like in high school?
Yeah, I started in middle school, and then in college, I was a Spanish major. I studied abroad in Costa Rica, and then came to graduate school at UNC to study comparative literature, which is basically world literature.
Okay. So
And
it's kind of been your thing for a long time.
yeah, I could have taught in English, but Spanish has a lot more jobs, and I found, oh, I really, really enjoy this.
Yeah.
There's just something really fun about it for me.
Does UNC have an open campus? Like, can I go into your class and learn Spanish for free?
Um, Technically, no.
You can walk into any building you want, though.
They want to know, sadly, who is in what classroom,
Hmm.
and I think that that is a result of Virginia Tech and the shootings over the
Of
years.
America gun problems or
Yes,
school shooting problems.
right. Because it didn't used to be that you couldn't have people sit in on your class just auditing without filling out all the paperwork. But
Right.
now we have received the message loudly and clearly. We want to know who is in your classroom. And
Okay.
I don't know that that's the reason for it, but I suspect that it came about because of that.
That's why I would do it.
Yeah.
After, some shootings took place at my campus, I'm like, all right, let's tighten up security a little bit. I get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I grew up in Carson City, Nevada, and there's a lot of Mexicans there. So a lot of my friends were Mexican. So I wouldn't say I speak Spanish, but I like very little I can speak. I can understand more than I can speak, but
Mhm.
it's something I've always wanted to be fluent in just because
Yeah.
of the benefits in society. There's a lot of uses for it everywhere
Yeah.
I'm at.
I
So
also just like connecting to other people. And if you can do it in their own language, then so much the better because there's so much richness there that's lost in translation.
oh yeah, you can make so many more friends.
Yeah.
And thank you for tuning in to Almost Above Average today with our special guest, Professor Elizabeth Tolman. Her story of resilience and compassion is truly inspiring. We appreciate her valuable insights and the wisdom that she shared with us. Elizabeth's dedication to creating a positive community and her advice on navigating conversations about loss are both powerful and meaningful. Her strength in the face of challenges is a testament to her character. We thank Elizabeth for being with us today and sharing her story. Remember to be kind and compassionate. Please share this episode with others, leave a 5-star rating, and subscribe to Almost Above Average for more inspiring conversations on any podcast app. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes, and until next time, take care and God bless. Almost Above Average is produced by McMedia Network and Entertainment. All rights reserved.